How would you feel if it was a felony for you to marry the person that you love? This is exactly what happened to Mildred and Richard Loving, two people who fell in love and happened to be an interracial couple. During my audience analysis, I found that only one of you had heard of the Loving versus Virginia trial. I also found that none of you saw anything wrong with interracial marriage. This trial played a key role in abolishing the remaining laws of anti-miscegenation in the United States. During my research, I read two books on the Loving versus Virginia trial, and I also watched the documentary that was put on by the BBC network that included an interview from Mildred and Richard Loving. I also have a personal connection, I feel, to this trial. I'm going to show you a picture now of my husband and myself. We have been married for almost 6 years. Throughout the next several minutes, I'm going to tell you more about the term miscegenation. I'm going to tell you about Mildred and Richard Loving, about their initial and subsequent arrests, and the Supreme Court decision. So first, the term miscegenation refers to the marriage between two people of different races. In the United States, it focused more on marriages between white and black people. Virginia was the first state to have these laws, and the last update to this law was the Racial Integrity Act of 1924, which specifically prohibited the marriage between people classified as white or black. I'm going to show you a map of the United States, which I got from the Wikimedia website. What this is showing is the states that had these laws and when they had them. The gray states are states that actually never had these laws. And you can see that Minnesota and Wisconsin never had laws banning interracial marriage. The green states repealed these laws before 1887. The yellow states repealed from 1948 to 1967. And the red states still had these laws in 1967. What this is telling us is that less than 50 years ago, these states in the red thought that it was a crime for interracial couples to get married. So who were Mildred and Richard Loving? They both grew up in Central Point, Virginia, and Mildred was an African American and American Indian. Richard was a white man. They met in school and they became childhood sweethearts. Mildred became pregnant at the age of 18, and they decided they wanted to get married. So on June 2nd, 1958, they traveled to Washington, D.C., where it was legal, and they tied the knot. But unfortunately, their honeymoon was short-lived. According to Mildred Loving, someone anonymously complained about their marriage, and on July 13, 1958, at 2 a.m., their home was raided and they were arrested on felony charges. Their trial was in January of 1959, and that was overseen by Judge Leon Brazel. He ordered them to either spend 1 year in jail or leave the state of Virginia for 25 years. As he handed down his sentence, he said, and I quote, "Almighty God created the races, white, black, yellow, Malay, and red, and he placed them on separate continents. And but for the interference with his arrangement, there would be no cause for such marriages. The fact that he separated the races shows that he did not intend for the races to mix." And with that, Mildred and Richard decided to move to Washington, D.C. They tried to make a life there. They had 3 children. They struggled financially and especially emotionally because they had no friends or family there. They would travel back and forth from Washington, D.C. to Virginia to visit and spend holidays with family. And they were not aware that it was still breaking the law for them to enter the state of Virginia. So in Easter of 1959, they were again arrested. And this time they didn't return for the trial for fear that they were going to be put in jail. In 1963, Mildred decided to write a letter to then Attorney General Bobby Kennedy asking for help in their situation. He then passed that letter on to the American Civil Liberties Union. Now this was a turning point for Mildred and Richard. The American Civil Liberties Union appointed them 2 attorneys, Bernie Cohen and Phil Hirschkopf. These 2 attorneys made several attempts to get Virginia State Court to reverse their judgment, to no avail. So then finally, in December of 1966, the case went to the United States Supreme Court. Mildred and Richard did not attend the trials, and Attorney Bernie Cohen asked Richard, "Is there anything that you want me to tell the court?" Richard simply said, "Just tell the court that I love my wife, and it is just not fair that we can't live together in Virginia." There's many different arguments for why these laws should be abolished. The main argument that they focused on was that it violated the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment has many different parts to it, What they focused on was the Citizenship Clause, which states that anybody born in the United States is a United States citizen, and that cannot be taken away from us. They also focused on the Equal Protection Clause, which states that we are not allowed to be discriminated against under the law, and this was definitely discrimination. So after closing arguments, finally, in June 12, 1967, it was a unanimous decision, and the Supreme Court determined that this law was unconstitutional. So in review, the Loving versus Virginia trial played the key part in ridding the United States of laws that were banning the interracial marriage laws. Mildred and Richard were two people in love who just wanted to spend their lives together as everyone else did. They had many struggles, missing their families, struggling financially, when all they wanted was to live in the place that they had always called home. I think it is so fitting that their last name is Loving, and so that we don't forget this landmark decision, there's an unofficial holiday called Loving Day, which is celebrated on June 12th, and this celebrates this true love story. Thank you.